The Discourses of Christ of the Last Days.
The attitude man should have toward God. Those who genuinely submit to God and genuinely accept the truth should not develop misunderstandings about God, nor should they attach their appraisal or judgment to anything God does. In the age of law, God said He would give Abraham a son. What did Abraham say to that? He said nothing. He believed what God said. This was Abraham's attitude. Did he make any judgment? Did he scoff? Did he do anything furtive? He did not, nor did he engage in any petty maneuvering. This is called submission. It is called keeping fast to one's place and one's duty. As for his wife Sarah, was she not different from Abraham? What was her attitude toward God? She questioned, scoffed, disbelieved, and she judged, and she engaged in petty maneuvering, giving Abraham her handmaiden as a concubine, doing such an absurd thing. This came from the will of man. Sarah did not keep fast to her own place. She doubted the words of God and did not believe in His almightiness. What was the cause of her disbelief? There were two causes and contexts. One was that Abraham was by then quite old. The other was that she herself was also quite aged and unable to bear children. So she thought, "This is impossible. How will God accomplish this? Isn't this absurd? Isn't this like trying to play a trick played on a child?" She did not accept or believe what God said as the truth, but took it as a jest, thinking that God was joking with people. Is this the right attitude? Is this the attitude with which one should treat the Creator? So did she keep fast to her place? She did not keep fast. Because she took God's words in jest and not as the truth, and because she did not believe what God said or what He was going to do, she acted absurdly, causing a series of consequences, all of which came from the will of man. In essence, she was saying, "Can God do this thing? If He cannot, I must take action to help fulfill these words of God." Within her, there were misunderstandings, judgments, speculations, and questions, all of which constituted rebellion against God by a person with a corrupt disposition. Did Abraham do these things? He did not, and so this blessing was bestowed on him. God saw Abraham's attitude toward Him, his God-fearing heart, his loyalty, and his genuine submission, and God would deliver a son unto him, that he would be the father of many nations. This is what was promised to Abraham, and Sarah benefited unexpectedly from it. Submission is therefore very important. Is there questioning within submission? If there is, does it count as true submission? If there is analysis and judgment within it, does it count then? And if one tries to gain leverage, it counts even less then. What then is manifested and revealed? And what is the behavior within submission that fully proves it to be true? True belief is one thing. One must correctly understand what God says and does, and confirm that all God does is right and the truth. There is no need to question it, nor to ask others about it, and there is no need to weigh it up or analyze it in one's own heart. This is one aspect of the content of submission, believing that everything God does is correct. When a person does something, one may look at which person did it, what kind of background they have, whether they've done any bad deeds, and how their character is. These things require analysis. If, on the other hand, something comes from God and is done by Him, you must cover your mouths at once and harbor no second thoughts. Do not question it and do not raise queries, but accept it in its entirety. And what is to be done next? There are some truths involved here that people do not understand, and they don't know God. Although they believe it is God's doing and are capable of submission, they don't genuinely understand the truth. What they understand still has somewhat of a doctrinal nature, and they are unsettled at heart. At such times, they must seek, asking, "What truth is there in this? Where is the error in my thinking? How did I become distanced from God? Which of my views are in conflict with what God says?" Next, they should seek after these things. This is an attitude and practice of submission. There are those who say they are submissive, but when something later befalls them, they ponder, "Who knows what God does? We created beings can't interfere. Let God do whatever He wants." Is this submission? What kind of attitude is this? It is an aversion to taking responsibility. It is a lack of concern for what God does and cold indifference toward it. Abraham was able to submit because he observed the principles, and he was resolved in his belief that what God said must be done and must be fulfilled. He was 100% certain about these two musts. He therefore did not question. He did not make any assessment, nor did he engage in any petty maneuvering. That is how Abraham behaved in his submission. It was a blessing that Abraham obtained from God. He didn't raise any doubts and didn't mix human will into anything he did. The situation Job encountered, however, was markedly different from Abraham. What was different about it? What Abraham encountered was a blessing. It was a good thing. At nearly 100 years old, he was childless and hoping for a child when God promised to give him a son. How could he not be happy? He was certainly willing to submit. But what Job encountered was misfortune. Why was he still able to submit?
He believed in his heart that everything was God's doing.
This is one aspect. There is another. Oftentimes people can submit when they aren't subjected to too much suffering, and they can submit when God bestows blessings. But when God takes away, it is not easy for them to submit anymore. As for Job, what kind of view did he have? What kind of rationality did he possess? What truths did he understand? Or what aspect of understanding of God did he have for him to be able to accept and submit to that misfortune?
He believed that everything God does is good. He believed in his heart that everything he had was given by God, not earned by his own labor. God's taking it away is also his authority. he possessed this kind of rationality, so he was able to accept and submit.
If people believe everything God does is good, it's easy for them to submit. But is it still easy to submit when it seems that everything God does brings misfortune to people? Which is more indicative of genuine submission?
Still being able to submit when it seems that everything God does brings misfortune to people.
So what kind of rationality and truth did Job possess to be able to accept that misfortune?
Job truly treated God as God. He understood that God isn't just the one who bestows blessings and grace. Even when he takes away, he is still God. He also understood that even if one meets with calamities, it is because God allows it. No matter what God does, he remains God, and humans should always worship him.
Mainly, it is that Job had some understanding of God and assumed his position well. He recognized that the essence of God will not change because external people, events, and things change. That God's essence is always and forever God's essence. It is unchanging. It's not that if God bestows blessings upon people, he is God, and that if all he does is bring calamity to people, inflict suffering and punishment upon them, or destroy them, his essence changes and he ceases to be God. God's essence never changes. The essence of man doesn't change either. That is, man's status and essence as a created being will never change. Even if you can fear God and know him, you are still a created being. Your essence does not change. God put Job through such immense trials, yet Job was still able to submit and did not complain. Besides having some knowledge of God, what was his greatest strength that enabled him to submit and refrain from complaining? It was that he knew that humans will always be humans. However God treats them is completely correct. To put it plainly, however God treats you is how you should be treated. Doesn't this explain things? Do not demand how God should treat you, what blessings he should give you, or what trials he should put you through, and what significance his work should have on you. You cannot demand these things. Making these demands is unreasonable. Some people, during times of peace and security, say that whatever God does is good, but then they cannot accept it when something happens that isn't in line with their notions. This must be resolved with the truth. What is this truth? It is standing firm in your own position. However God treats you is deserved and without error. No matter how God treats you, he is still God. People should not make demands of him. Do not evaluate God's correctness, and do not evaluate the reasons, goals, or significance of his actions. These things do not need your evaluation. Your responsibility and duty is to stand firm in your position as a created being and let God orchestrate as he will. That is the right way. This is easy to say, but difficult to practice. And yet people must understand this truth. Only by understanding the truth can you have genuine submission when something befalls you. Some people, having believed in God and listened to sermons up to now, think, Job could submit to the trials God gave him because Job knew that everything comes from the hand of God. However many cattle and sheep, or however much property, wealth, and progeny one has, it is all bestowed by God. It is not up to people. People are like slaves before God. They must endure however He treats them. They use this sort of negative attitude to know God. Is knowing God in this way correct? It is certainly not correct. What would be an accurate way to know God then?
People are created beings, and God is forever God. No matter how God acts, people should just let God orchestrate them as He wishes.
That's right. Do not demand that God should act a certain way. Do not demand that God should spell everything out for you in fellowship. If He doesn't make it clear, you shouldn't contend with God, thinking you have a reason. This is wrong. It is extremely arrogant and self-righteous, and greatly lacking in conscience and reason. This is not what a created being should say. Even Satan doesn't dare speak to God in such a hysterical manner. You are a corrupt human being. How could you be even more arrogant than Satan? Just what position should people assume when speaking to God? How should one understand this matter? Actually, Job's statement, "Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil?" already clarifies why he was able to submit to God, and there is truth to be sought within it. Did he express any complaints or grievances when he made this statement? Was there any ambiguity or negative implications? Definitely not. Job ultimately realized through his experiences that how the Creator treats people is not for people to decide. This might sound a little unpleasant, but it is a fact. God has arranged everyone's fate for their entire life. Whether you accept it or not, it's a fact. You cannot change your destiny. God is the Creator, and you should submit to His orchestrations and arrangements. However God acts is correct, because He is the truth, and He is the sovereign over all things, and people should submit to Him. This all things includes you, and it includes all created beings. Whose fault is it then that you always want to resist? It is your problem. You always want to find reasons and seize leverage. Is this right? You always want to receive blessings and benefits from God. Is this right? None of it is right. These views represent an incorrect knowledge and understanding of God. Precisely because your view of believing in God is incorrect, you will inevitably clash, contend with, and oppose God whenever you face some situation, always thinking, "It is wrong of God to do this. I can't understand it." Everyone would protest His doing it that way. It's not like God to do that. But this matter is not one of what God is like. Whatever God does, He is still God. If you lack this reason and this understanding, always scrutinizing and making deductions when things befall you each day, the result will be that you will only contend with and oppose God at every turn, and you won't be able to break out of this state. But if you have this understanding and you can take the position of a created being, and when you encounter situations, you compare yourself to this aspect of the truth and practice and enter into it, then your inner fear of God will increase over time. Unconsciously, you will come to feel, It turns out that what God does is not wrong. What God does is all good. People do not need to scrutinize and analyze it. Just put yourself at the mercy of God's orchestration. And when you find yourself unable to submit to God or accept His orchestrations, your heart will feel rebuked. I haven't been a good created being. Why can't I just submit? Isn't this making the Creator sad? The more you desire to be a good created being, the more your understanding and clarity of this aspect of the truth grows. But the more you think of yourself as someone significant, believing that God should not treat you this way, that He should not admonish you in that manner, that He should not prune and orchestrate you that way, then you're in trouble. If you have many demands of God in your heart, if you feel that there are many things God should not have done, then you're heading down the wrong path. Notions, judgments, and blasphemy will emerge, and you're not far from doing evil. When people who don't love the truth hear God's words, they start to analyze and scrutinize, gradually giving rise to doubts and mockery. Then they start to judge, deny, and condemn. This is the result. There are far too many people who treat God this way, all of which is caused by their corrupt disposition. Some people always think, I am a person. It is true that God is the Creator, but He must respect and understand me. He must love and protect me. Is this view correct? God has the final say in how He loves people. God is the Creator. How He treats created beings is His business. God has His principles and His dispositions. It is useless for people to have demands. They should instead learn how to understand God and submit to Him. This is the reason people ought to possess. Some people say, God is too rude to people. Doing things like this is not loving people. He doesn't respect people or treat them as humans. Some people are not humans. They are devils. Any way of treating them is acceptable. They deserve to be cursed and are unworthy of respect. There are those who say, I'm a pretty good person. I haven't done anything to resist God, and I've suffered a lot for Him. Why does He still prune me so? Why does He always neglect me? Why doesn't He ever acknowledge me or elevate me? Still others say, I'm a simple and guileless person. I've believed in God since I was in the womb, and I still believe in Him now. I'm so pure. I left my family and quit my job to expend myself for God, and I thought how much God loved me. Now, it seems that God does not love people so much, and I feel left out in the cold, disappointed and dismayed with Him. Isn't this troublesome? What are these people doing wrong? They have not remained in their proper place. They do not know who they are, and they always think that they are someone significant, whom God should respect and raise up, or treasure and cherish. If people always have such misconceptions, such distorted and unreasonable demands, it is very dangerous. At the very least, they will be loathed and hated by God, and if they don't repent, they are at risk of being eliminated. So what should people do? How should they know themselves? And how should they treat themselves so as to conform to God's requirements, resolve these difficulties, and let go of their demands of God. Some people are arranged by the house of God to be leaders, and they are particularly enthusiastic. After they work for a while, it is discovered that they can do some outside tasks well enough, but can't handle problem solving. They cannot fellowship the truth to resolve issues, so their leadership role in the church is replaced. Isn't this very appropriate? But they start to argue and complain, saying, "Those false leaders and antichrists didn't perform their assigned jobs well. All they did was cause disruptions and disturbances. They should indeed be replaced and eliminated. But I haven't done anything bad. Why am I also being replaced?" They feel a bit upset. Why is that? They feel that since they didn't do anything bad, they should still be a leader and should not be replaced. They feel the house of God has been very unfair to them. Their heart is full of complaints and resistance, and notions about God arise in them, leading to inner imbalance. Was it not said that there are principles for the election and elimination of leaders? It seems to me that there is no principle to what happened. God has made a mistake. In short, so long as God does something that harms their interests and hurts their feelings, they start picking fault. Is this a problem? How can this problem be solved? You must recognize your own identity. You must know who you are. No matter what sort of gifts or strengths you have, nor how much skill or ability you have, nor even how much merit you have earned in God's house, nor how much you have rushed about, nor how much capital you have accrued. These things are as nothing to God, and if they seem important from where you stand, then have there not arisen misunderstandings and contradictions between you and God? How should this problem be resolved? If you desire to shrink the distance between you and God and resolve these contradictions, how should this be done? You have to deny those things you think are right and to which you cling. In doing so, there will no longer be a distance between you and God, and you will stand properly in your station, and you will be able to submit, able to recognize that all God does is right, able to deny yourself and let go of yourself. You will no longer treat the merit you have earned as a sort of capital, nor will you try any longer to set conditions with God, or make demands of Him, or ask Him for reward. At this time, you will no longer have difficulties. Why do all man's misconceptions of God arise? They arise because people cannot measure their own capabilities. To be precise, they do not know what sort of things they are in God's eyes. They rate themselves too highly and estimate their position in God's eyes too highly, and they see what they consider to be a person's worth and capital as the truth, as the standards by which God measures whether they will be saved. This is wrong. You must know what kind of place you have in God's heart, and that however God treats you is appropriate. You ought to know this principle, and then you'll conform to the truth and accord with God's views. You must possess this reason and be able to submit to God. Regardless of how He treats you, you must submit. Then there will no longer be any contradictions between you and God. And when God again treats you in His manner, will you not be able to submit? Will you still contend with and oppose God? You will not. Even if you feel some discomfort in your heart, or you feel that God's treatment of you is not as you would wish and you don't understand why He would treat you that way, nevertheless, because you already understand some truths and possess some realities, and because you are able to stand fast in your position, you will no longer fight against God, which means that those actions and behaviors of yours that would cause you to perish will cease to be. And will you not then be safe? Once you are safe, you will feel grounded, which means you have begun to walk the path of Peter. You see, Peter believed in God for so many years, groped his way for so many years, and suffered so much. It was only after experiencing many trials that he finally understood some truths and possessed some truth realities. And as for you all now, I've spoken so much, explained everything clearly. It's tantamount to getting things served on a platter, isn't it? You've attained so much without going down any detours. You've all gotten quite the bargain. So why do you still know no contentment? You should not have any additional demands. What have we primarily fellowshipped on today? One aspect is regularly paying attention to examining the various aspects of your state, and then analyzing them to know whether they are right. The other aspect is resolving the various misunderstandings of God that arise in you. When you have misunderstandings of God, there are intransigent, biased elements in you that will prevent you from seeking the truth. If your misunderstandings of God are removed, you will be able to seek the truth. If they are not, there will be a feeling of estrangement in your heart, and you will pray in a perfunctory way. This is cheating God, and He will not listen at all. If you have misunderstandings of God, creating distance and estrangement between you and Him, and your heart is closed to Him, then you won't want to listen to His words or seek the truth. No matter what you do, it will just be going through the motions, disguising yourself and being deceptive. When man's misunderstandings of God are resolved, and he has stepped past this hurdle, he will regard each of God's words and requirements with sincerity and come before Him in earnest and with an honest heart. If, between man and God, there is contradiction, distance, and misunderstanding, then what role is man playing? It is the role of Satan, and it is in opposition to God. What consequences result from opposing God? Can such a person submit to God? Can they accept the truth? They cannot. If they cannot do any of these things, then that person will have end up with nothing, and the changes in their disposition will come to a standstill. Therefore, when one examines one's various states, in one regard, it is done to know oneself, while in another regard, it necessitates a focus on examining what misunderstandings one has of God. What do these misunderstandings entail? Notions, imaginings, delimitations, doubts, scrutiny, and speculations. Primarily these things. When a person has these within them, they misunderstand God. When you are caught up in these states, a problem arises in your relationship with God. You must seek out the truth at once to resolve it, and resolve it you must. Some think, I've developed a misunderstanding of God, so I can't perform my duty until I resolve this issue. Is this acceptable? No, it is not. Do not put off performing your duty, but perform your duty and resolve your issue at the same time. As you perform your duty, your misunderstanding of God will start changing for the better without your realizing it, and you will discover where your problem originated and how serious it is. Someday, you may be able to realize man is a created being, and the Creator is forever my Lord. The essence of this does not change. Man's status does not change, and neither does the status of God. No matter what God does, and even if all mankind sees what he does as wrong, I cannot deny what he has done, nor can I deny that he is the truth. God is the highest truth, eternally inerrant. Man should hold fast to his proper position. He should not scrutinize God, but accept God's orchestrations and accept all of his words. All God says and does is right. Man should not make various demands of God. Created beings are unqualified to do so. Even if God were to treat me as a plaything, I should still submit, and if I do not, that is my problem, not God's. When you have experience and knowledge of this aspect of the truth, you will truly enter into submission to God, and you will have no more major difficulties. And whether you are performing your duty or practicing various aspects of the truth, many difficulties will be resolved. Submission to God is the greatest truth. It is the most profound truth. Many times, when people are faced with various difficulties, when there are various obstacles, or when they encounter something they cannot come to terms with, what is the cause? They are standing in the wrong position. They have misunderstandings of God. They want to scrutinize God and do not want to treat him as God. They want to deny God's correctness, and they want to deny that God is the truth. This implies that man does not want to be a created being, but would like to be on equal footing with God, to find fault with him. This will cause trouble. If you can fulfill your duty properly and hold fast to your place as a created being, then essentially, no resistance to what God does will arise in you. You may have some misunderstandings, and you may have some notions, but at the least, your attitude will be one of willingness to accept God's orchestrations, and you will be coming from a place of willingness to submit to God, so no resistance to God will arise in you. Although Job had faith, did he know what was going on at first when God's trials came upon him? Humans do not have the faculty to directly penetrate the spiritual realm. Job knew nothing about what was happening there. He was completely unaware of anything. So, when God's trials came upon him, he was certainly bewildered, thinking, "Oh, what is going on? Everything was so peaceful. Why did this suddenly happen? Why did I suddenly lose all my livestock and possessions?" He was bewildered at first, but bewilderment was not equivalent to having misunderstandings of God. Bewilderment was not equivalent to not being able to understand what God was doing. It was just that everything happened so suddenly. Job didn't have any foreknowledge, nor did anyone give him prior notice. he was wholly unprepared. However, this doesn't mean he would make the wrong choices or take the wrong path, or that he couldn't submit. So, what did Job do next? He surely calmed his heart and seriously reflected on his actions, and he prayed to God. After a few days of seeking, he came to a conclusion. Jehovah gave, and Jehovah has taken away. Blessed be the name of Jehovah. Job making this statement represents his view and the path he walked. Although Job was initially bewildered when the trials came upon him, he knew that it was God's doing and not of human will. Without God's permission, no one could touch what God had given to people, not even Satan. On the surface, Job seemed to have some misunderstanding of what God was doing. He didn't know why this was happening to him or what God meant by it. He did not fully understand, but his misunderstanding was not a denial or questioning of what God was doing. Job's misunderstanding was the sort that God finds permissible. Following this, he quickly realized that Jehovah God intended to take away everything he had, and that what God was doing was right. He promptly knelt down to accept it. Can ordinary people reach this level? They cannot. Regardless of how bewildered Job was at the time, or how long it took for him to kneel down and accept all that had come upon him, his attitude was always to stand in the position of a created being. Faced with these events, he didn't say, "I'm wealthy and have so many servants. How can these things be taken away just like that? I need to tell my servants to get them back immediately." Did he do that? He did not. He was clear in his heart that this was God's doing, and man couldn't do anything about it. To get involved would mean opposing what God had done and opposing all that had come upon him. He did not utter a single complaint at that time, nor did he judge what was happening or interfere to try to reverse everything. He simply waited and quietly observed how things would unfold, seeing what God would do. From beginning to end, what Job did was to hold fast to his proper place. That is, he held fast to the place of a created being. This was his performance. Although Job was somewhat bewildered when these events came upon him, he was able to seek and acknowledge that all the Creator did was right, and then he submitted. He did not avail of human methods to resolve the issue. When the bandits came, he let them seize what they might. He did not act on his impetuousness to fight with them. In his heart, he thought, without God's permission, they couldn't seize anything. Now that they've taken everything, it is clear that God allowed it. Any human intervention would be useless. People cannot act on their impetuousness. They cannot intervene. Not intervening does not mean he was tolerating the bandits. It wasn't a sign of weakness or fear of the bandits. Rather, it was that he dreaded the hand of God, and he had a God-fearing heart. He said, "Let them take it. After all, these things were given by God." Isn't this what a created being should say? He did not have any complaints. He did not send anyone to fight or get his things back or protect his things. Isn't this a genuine manifestation of submission to God? He could only do this because he had a true understanding of God's sovereignty. Without this understanding, he would have resorted to human methods to fight and retrieve his things. And how would God have viewed this? This is not submitting to God's orchestrations. It lacks understanding of the things done by God's hand, and believing in him all these years would have been in vain. Being happy when God gives but resentful when he takes things away, feeling reluctant and wanting to seize them back by force. Not being content with what God is doing, not wanting to lose these things, only accepting God's rewards, but not his deprivations, not wanting to submit to the orchestrations of God's hand. Is this acting from the position of a created being? This is rebelliousness. It is opposition. Don't people often exhibit these behaviors? This is the complete opposite of what Job did. How did Job express that he could fear Jehovah in the position of a created being, submit to and accept God's trials, and accept what God bestowed upon him? Did he cry out? Did he complain? Did he use all sorts of human means and methods to get everything back? No. He allowed God to take away freely. Isn't this having faith? He had true faith, true understanding, and true submission. Not one of these things is simple. They all require a certain amount of time to experience, seek, and embrace. Job could only exhibit these manifestations once he had a certain level of understanding of the Creator. What did Job say in the end?
Jehovah gave, and Jehovah has taken away. Blessed be the name of Jehovah.
And what was it that Job's wife said? Curse God and die. What she meant was, stop believing. If it was really God you believed in, why are you facing calamity? Isn't this retribution? You didn't do anything wrong. Why is this happening to you? Maybe your faith is incorrect. How did Job respond to his wife? He said, "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks." Job said his wife was foolish, that she did not have true faith and understanding in God, which was why she could speak words of defiance against God. Job's wife did not know God. When such a major thing happened that was obviously God's doing, she astonishingly could not recognize this, and even advised Job, saying, "You've taken the wrong path. Stop believing and abandon your God." What an infuriating thing to hear. Why did she urge Job to abandon God? Because she had lost her property and could no longer enjoy its uses. She had gone from a rich woman to a pauper with nothing to her name. She was discontent with God's deprivation, so she told Job to stop believing. The implication being, I don't believe anymore, and neither should you. A perfectly good household has been stripped away, leaving us with nothing. In the blink of an eye, we've lost everything. Our riches turned to poverty. What's the point of believing in such a God? Stop believing. Aren't these foolish words? This was how she performed. Did Job listen to her? He did not. He was not misled or disturbed by her, nor did he accept her views. Why not? Because Job adhered to one statement. Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? He thought, all of this is exceedingly normal. However God acts is right. People should just accept it. People should not believe in God only to seek blessings. I've enjoyed God's blessings for so many years without doing anything for God. Now is the time to bear witness to Him. That which God takes away is His. He may take it whenever He likes. People should not have demands. They should just accept and submit. So, should you receive blessings from believing in God? Is this how it ought to be? When one can fully grasp this matter, then they will have faith. Whatever the Creator does is right and is the truth. No matter what He does, His identity and status do not change. All people should worship Him. He is humanity's eternal Lord and eternal God. This fact can never be changed. People cannot just acknowledge Him as God when He bestows gifts upon them, or not acknowledge Him as God when He takes things away from them. This is man's erroneous view, not a mistake in God's actions. If people understand the truth, then they will be able to see this clearly, and if deep down they are able to accept that this is the truth, then their relationship with God will become more and more normal. If you say you acknowledge that God's words are the truth, but when something happens you do not understand Him, and you even blame Him and are not truly submissive to Him, then it is meaningless when you say that you acknowledge that God's words are the truth. The most important thing is that your heart should be able to accept the truth, and that no matter what happens, you should be able to see that God's actions are right, and that He is righteous. This is the kind of person who understands God. There are many believers who focus only on understanding doctrine. They acknowledge spiritual theory, but when something befalls them, they do not accept the truth, and they do not submit. These are hypocritical people. The things you usually say are all correct, but when something happens that does not line up with your own notions, you are unable to accept it. You argue with God, thinking that God should not have done this or that. You cannot submit to God's work, and do not seek the truth or reflect on your rebelliousness. This means you are not submissive to God. You always like to argue with God. You always think that your arguments are superior to the truth, that if you could take to the stage to share them, many people would support you. But even if many people support you, they are all corrupted humans. Are the supporters and the supported not all corrupt humans? Do they not all lack truth? Even if all humankind supported you and opposed God, God would still be right. It would still be humanity who was wrong, who rebelled against and resisted God. Is this just an expression? No. This is a fact. It is the truth. People must frequently ponder and experience this aspect of the truth. God has done His work in 3 stages, and at each stage there were many people who opposed it. Like when the Lord Jesus came to do His work of redemption, the whole of Israel rose up against Him. But now, humanity has billions of people who all acknowledge the Lord Jesus as the Savior. His believers are spread all throughout the world. The Lord Jesus has already redeemed all humanity. This is a fact. No matter which country's people want to deny this, it is of no avail. No matter how corrupt humans evaluate God's work and the truths that God speaks are always right and correct. No matter how many people in the entire human race rise up against God, it is futile. Everything God does is correct. He does not make even the smallest mistake. Because corrupt humans have no truth and are completely unable to see the significance and essence of God's work clearly, nothing they say is in line with the truth. Even if you were to summarize all the theories of humanity, they still would not be truth. They could not outweigh any one of God's words, or any word of the truth. This is a fact. If people do not understand this, then they must slowly experience it. What is the prerequisite to this experience? You must first acknowledge and accept that God's words are the truth. Then you must go on to practice and experience them. Before you know it, you will discover that God's words are the truth. This is absolutely correct. At that point, you will start to cherish the words of God, place importance on pursuing the truth, and will be able to accept the truth into your heart and make it your life.